We are live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this month's Speak to Council session. As a reminder, all speakers have 2 minutes for their comments. If speakers are participating via Zoom, we ask they address council with the same respect they would expect, and to avoid the use of profanities. A staff member will notify speakers when they have 30 seconds left, and speakers will be removed from the Zoom call once their time has expired. Staff members will read the first 2 minutes of all written comments submitted. I'd like to remind our participants that those watching online that my colleagues and I are here to listen. We're here to listen to the comments presented before us tonight. And as such, it is standard that we do not respond during the session. Participants' contact information has been shared with each council member, and I encourage my colleagues to follow up with any comments or concerns that pique their interest. Additionally, City Council will be hosting 2 public forums this week on Wednesday and Thursday to hear feedback from the community regarding the draft Executive Order 203 Police Reform Plan. We encourage anyone interested in sharing their opinions, comments, or concerns to sign up. Please visit www.cityofrochester.gov public meetings for more information. We will now begin our Speak to Council session.
James Thompson will be joining us by Zoom.
Mr. Thompson, you can begin whenever and I'll start your time.
You need to turn your speaker on, sir. Your mic.
Hello. Thank you for having me here, council persons and President Scott. My name is James Thompson. I live in Rochester, New York. I want to first thank council for. Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You need to turn your speaker on, sir.
Excuse me. I think I'm getting a reverb. That's what's going on.
Turn down your YouTube. If you got YouTube on or another device,
Okay.
off or down.
Oh, okay. I think it's okay now.
Yes, sir. You sound clear.
Okay, I'm sorry. Again, thank you, council members. Thank you, President Scott, for having me here. My name is James Thompson. I want to thank you for your resolution, 115. We certainly do better when we hold each other accountable. And this includes holding the mayor accountable. We've had a lot of incidents of police brutality lately, and people are demanding justice and they're demanding transparency. And so it's very important that that you do what you did. I also wanted to point out there's a certain irony in it, because what this investigation should be done by the Police Accountability Board. And of course, their investigative powers are still there. Their disciplinary powers are being held up in appeals court, but in the meantime, we need to utilize them as much as possible for transparency and for public access. Also, in Article 3, Section 3 of the powers and duties of the mayor, it says that the mayor is capable of removing a public employee, such as a police officer, under certain conditions, under her discretion. And in addition, under Article 2, number 19, the city council itself can remove a police officer. They have to have a hearing, and they can call witnesses, I believe, but it's important to keep that. It's important to keep that in mind, that until Police Accountability Board has its full powers, you must hold yourselves accountable. we must all hold each other accountable, and then we'll be able to have a better community. I think this is all I have to say now, but when we have incidents like Harris Street and Portland Avenue, please make sure that the board gets the information it needs. Don't just tell the public that the board has the information, but please give that to the board, and it'll make things better for this whole community. Thank you very much.
Elizabeth McGriff will be joining us by Zoom. I don't see her. Katie, do you see her?
No, I do not.
Paul Flansburgh by Zoom.
Paul, whenever you're ready, you can begin and I'll start your time. You're muted.
You're muted, sir.
Okay. For 15 years, since 1989, I've lived in Rochester.
Paul, whenever you're ready. You can
Okay,
begin and I'll start
oh, sorry, let me turn off the second thing. Give me a second, please.
your time. You're muted.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? All right.
Yes.
For 15 years, since 1989, I've lived in Rochester. Circumstances related to a near fatal car accident have caused me to live with my non-city resident family members. I remain close to Rochester and its residents as I'm particularly invested in justice efforts so central to our city. Chief among those efforts is direct support and advocacy for victims of police brutality. Let's make no mistake. Police brutality exists in Rochester. We've gained national and international infamy. My focus today as a member of Enough is Enough and the Police Accountability Board Alliance is necessary funding for our Police Accountability Board to have its desired effect. As publicly delineated by the Executive Director, Connor Dwyer Reynolds, someone met with unanimous approval by your board, greater fiscal investment is necessary to fulfill its duties as prescribed by law. In a nutshell, $5 million are required to adequately allow PAB to function in accordance with its powers already. $4.8 million is necessary for a staff of 35 to take complaints, prosecute complaints within 90 days as mandated by the charter, reimagine public safety, educate, and engage the community. And that's even without disciplinary powers. Roughly another $3 million will be required to staff that. So what do I discover from meet and greet with Councilman Evans? Not only does council not intend to increase funding, you plan to vote to decrease the $395,000 already promised. The graphic supplied by Ravi Mangla of Citizen Action, please reference what I sent you. The graphic supplied by Ravi Mangla of Citizen Action says it all. Currently, a staff of 1 is supposed to hold a staff of 850 accountable. It's just not logistically possible. Thank you.
Tracy Farmer will be joining us by Zoom. I don't see her either. Do you? Okay.
No.
Teresa Green.
Dear Rochester City,
Bridget, you're on mute.
dear Rochester City Council members, the Maternal and Child Health Advisory Group is writing to support housing policies that have great potential to impact the health and well-being of our most vulnerable residents. The MCHAG stands with the Monroe County Community Health Improvement Work Group and the Citywide Tenant Union of Rochester to encourage the Rochester City Council to approve the tenant opportunity to purchase legislation and the good cause eviction legislation currently being considered. The Maternal Child Health Advisory Group is a collaboration of over 50 healthcare providers, researchers, social workers, and community organization leaders who are dedicated to the health and well-being of women of reproductive age, including pregnant women and young families in Monroe County. The group was created in response to the need for reducing disparities in maternal and child health outcomes identified in the Monroe County Community Health Needs Assessment, conducted by local hospitals and the Monroe County Department of Public Health with strong community input. Housing is a critical social determinant of health and housing security positively impacts both physical and mental health. Lack of housing, housing insecurity, eviction events, and unsafe housing conditions have profound and long-lasting direct and indirect impacts on the health and well-being of residents in our community. The impacts of childhood housing insecurity have long-term negative health
30
impacts
seconds.
long into adulthood. Pregnant women and families with young children are particularly susceptible to housing insecurity, but are also more likely to stay in a potentially unsafe situation to avoid being unhoused, which can cause undue mental and physical stress. Low-income women, women of color, and single female heads of houses are particularly vulnerable and are more likely to be impacted by housing insecurity and the health consequences of these insecurities.
That's time.
Rachel Allen.
Dear Rochester City Council members, on behalf of the Monroe County Community Health Improvement Work Group, we're writing in strong support of the housing policies being considered by the Rochester City Council, particularly the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, TOPA, and good cause eviction legislation. The Community Health Improvement Work Group is a collaborative between the local hospitals, Strong Memorial, Highland, Rochester General, and Unity, and several community groups dedicated to improving the health of our community. The CHIWA conducts a federally and state mandated community health needs assessment, CHNA, every 3 years, and plans and implements a community health improvement plan. Based on the community needs identified in the CHNA. For 2019 through 2021, the CHNA identified 2 main areas of focus: maternal child health, equity, and mental health and well-being, both of which require equitable housing, strong tenant protections, and measures to reduce displacement. Housing is a critical social determinant of health, meaning that it has the potential to positively or negatively impact both physical and mental health. Lack of housing, housing insecurity, eviction events, unsafe housing conditions have profound and long-lasting direct and indirect impacts on the health and well-being of residents in our community. Housing is intrinsically tied to mental health, with housing insecurity being a factor in anxiety disorders and overall stress. Those with pre-existing mental health and substance use disorders are at a higher risk for housing insecurity and homelessness. Supporting housing security through the policy would significantly improve mental health and well-being for our community, a goal of CHIWA, the Community Health Improvement Plan. Pregnant women and families.
That's time.
Kathy Rivers will be joining us by Zoom. I don't see her.
She's in the meeting. Whenever you're ready, I'll start your time. Yep.
Okay.
Hi, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Council. I'm Kathy Rivers, a Rochester resident and member of the Police Accountability Board Alliance and Action Together Rochester. I wanted to talk with you tonight about safety in our city. I've lived here in Rochester for the majority of the last 3 decades. Throughout the years, it's become increasingly plain to myself and my neighbors how little we can depend on the RPD to serve with integrity and keep us safe. I witnessed a domestic dispute in the street last week, along with several others. Excuse me, it was upsetting. Some of the folks involved were Black. No one called the RPD, even when one of the moms brought out a gun. We knew the RPD would not only fail to de-escalate and improve the situation, but more likely make it worse, endangering the children and possibly killing one of the parents involved. There's no one for us to call anymore in these situations. The RPD's utter failure to serve and our mutual distrust of their officers is why we voted in favor of the Police Accountability Board by an overwhelming margin. We need their independent, civilian-led review to bring justice to the people of Rochester, particularly to the people they've brutalized and the families of the men they've killed. The RPD has proven they cannot do this for themselves. The mayor has proven she will not help us deliver justice or real reform. The PAB can and should be engaged in reimagining safety and bringing transparency and accountability to the force. They need funds, resources, and adherence to the charter content to do this. The charter states that the PAB's executive director shall be responsible for the hiring and supervising of staff. That's in section 18.6C7. The PAB director wants to hire a chief of
30
education and
seconds.
community engagement. In addition, the PAB has noted it needs independent counsel. In section 1810, it states the board may seek and retain independent legal counsel for any purpose and at its discretion. Council should support this option as well. Others have spoken on the need for funding. I'll just reiterate that the state has given us $1 million for the PAB to do their vital work. City Council should also support that. It's only through accountability and transparency that our communities will ever come to trust the RPD again. We all want that. The PAB plays a central role in making that happen. Please support them, advocate for them, get them the resources they need to help us reimagine and deliver safety to our city. Thank you.
Penny Townsend Quill will be joining us by Zoom.
Yes, good evening, council members and President Scott. My name is Penny Quill. I'm a resident of the city of Rochester, and I'm here tonight to talk about an urgent matter, funding for the Police Accountability Board. The PAB exists because the citizens of the city of Rochester asked for a transparent, independent civilian review board. These are the same citizens who voted you into office and are thinking about the next election. These are the same citizens who watch the evening news and see footage of a 9-year-old getting pepper sprayed and handcuffed. These are the same citizens who wonder why it took months to hear about the killing of Daniel Prude and expressed astonishment when an internal review board cleared the officers of wrongdoing. I'm just going to try and show you an interesting graph, which you may or may not be able to see. It shows 75 cities near Rochester's size. The red arrow on the left show that we are number 2 most police city of the entire group. Only Birmingham, Alabama beats us out. The PAB exists to provide checks and balances on the RPD. The PAB has been written into legislation and is
30 seconds.
city government. Why is the PAB not adequately funded? The PAB has only one paid staff person. I'm a city resident. How am I going to trust city officials who ignore legislation that has specific wording about, quote, adequate PAB funding of staff and all necessary operating expenses for the purpose of resolving all complaints within 90 days, end quote. I'll end by saying there could have been a different outcome for the family of Daniel Prude if there had been adequate funding for the PAB. Thank you so much for your time.
Jane Blee will be joining us by Zoom.
Hello, I've been a Rochester resident for 28 of the 38 years I've lived in Monroe County. My husband, Mike, and I chose to move back into the city 10 years ago, partly because we wanted to have a voice in elections and in other concerns to help strengthen the city. I'm passionate about addressing racial inequity here because I've seen it in person with a Black Fresh Air Fund kid that I hosted, with a Black brother-in-law who was visiting, with a friend's son who was stopped while bicycling while Black. Also, my husband and I have been our friends, mentors, and advocates to numerous people of color who have reported issues with police. I'm passionate about the Police Accountability Board because it has the potential to impact systemic reform that was voted in by our community. I'm very distressed that so far it's encountering incredible barriers and what I and many others voted it in to accomplish. It needs to be fully funded at $5 million to have enough staff to accomplish the charter that you set it to have. It needs to receive RPD information that it has the power and right to request in a timely way in order to be effective. And it needs to have disciplinary power reinstated. As my elected representatives, it's your role to implement the programs and actions that we vote in. I depend on you to do what is necessary to make the PAB a reality. It's only one, but it's a very important step towards changing the systems and actions in our
30
community
seconds.
so that racial equity becomes much more of a priority and reality than it currently is. And finally, if you haven't read Caste or My Grandmother's Hands, I urge you to read those. They are transformative in terms of understanding these issues. Thank you.
Susan Rodeo.
I realize there are many serious issues facing the city and police department. The issues I am concerned about are appropriate at this time because of the police contract negotiations. These issues include the enforcement of traffic laws and city noise ordinances. Traffic law enforcement is non-existent on the major streets in my neighborhood, including Mount Hope Avenue, South Avenue, and South Clinton Avenue. Driving at highway speeds and running red lights are the norm for these streets. The police have publicly stated that traffic law enforcement is too dangerous for the officers, that there are not enough personnel to assign to traffic law enforcement duty, and that given the reduction in the police force in the near term, there will not be enough officers to assign to this duty. For example, in the past few weeks, I watched as several cars in succession went through the red light at the corner of Highland Avenue and Mount Hope as I was waiting to cross. And I have seen drivers at highway speeds on Mount Hope between Elmwood and Cypress Streets on a daily basis. Pedestrians and bicyclists crossing at the flashing beacon near Robinson Drive take a chance every time they step out into the street because traffic rarely stops. City noise ordinances are ignored by motorcyclists and other vehicles 24 hours a day. I don't live on Mount Hope, but the traffic noise and loud music are disruptive to my sleep and the enjoyment of my yard. In addition, speeding traffic is louder than traffic driving at the speed limit. I hope that changes can be made to enforce these laws and
30
ordinances
seconds.
so that the quality of life and our safety become a priority.
Carrie Murray by Zoom.
Hi, thank you for listening to me. I've been a resident of the city of Rochester for over 30 years. I've run the Saturday meal at St. Joseph's House of Hospitality for the same amount of time, and I'm a professor emeritus at Nazareth College, where I've taught criminal justice. I'm also a member of the PAB Alliance. 3 points. I want to reiterate the need to fully fund the Police Accountability Board. Secondly, I would urge the council to press the city to develop an organizational process to provide timely and complete information to the PAB in the event of a police incident. And third, I would suggest that the council set up an independent commission to investigate, evaluate, and report on the training which RPD officers receive and on what other types of police training are available. When I watched the shooting of Tyshawn Jones, I was deeply disturbed, in part because I've been doing Catholic worker hospitality for over 40 years, and we've dealt with knife incidents numerous times, always non-violently. And despite the tremendous danger when there's a weapon involved, I really believe that with 5 police officers on the scene, they could have disarmed Mr. Jones without killing him. They may have been following training, but it raises the issue of what the training is. Thank you.
Lisa Shaw.
Dear City Council, you have no idea of the suffering of city cats on our streets. There are so many abandoned pets turned out onto the streets, many not spayed or neutered, some injured or ill. All are barely subsisting on the charity of people who feed them. These animals could be cared for by Verona Street Animal Society, prevented from reproducing, receive veterinary care, and many become household pets again. The pharaohs could have a chance to live safe, secure lives on farms and in warehouses. Organizations like Habitat for Cats, where I volunteer, are trying their best, but we need city assistance to control the population and give them better lives. Please open VSAS again for intake and adoption. The current policy is not working.
Kate Sullivan.
I have been rescuing animals for 35 years, and I'm more concerned than ever. Pregnant cats are everywhere in many areas of Rochester. Because of shelters being closed for months last year during breeding season, the cat population has gone unchecked for a year. Without a major effort from RAS and Lollipop Farm, meaning easy to access spay-neuter clinics, the suffering will only get worse. If you think the cats aren't suffering, get out of your office and take a ride and survey the gaunt, homeless cats. We should do better. Leaving them out there unaltered isn't humane.
Barbara Pingree.
To the powers at be who need to hear this. I see and hear daily the plight that homeless and feral cats are suffering in the city streets. The new model that was implemented has been done very poorly, and our city's residents are not being represented. You will see a tidal wave of suffering and dying kittens and cats if this is allowed to continue. I urge you to demand RAS operate in a way that it is funded to operate. Their existence is to protect and care for our city strays, and it is a sad disgrace that they are doing neither with this new model. Where's the compassion and the conscience? Where's the money being used that our citizens are donating with the express purpose of ending this suffering? This is such an embarrassment, but more so, it's a sad disgrace.
Suzanne Marie Nugent.
I am writing to you today on behalf of all the homeless cats and kittens that are currently struggling to survive in our very own city, Rochester, New York. Since the start of the pandemic, the shelter at Verona Street has locked its doors in more ways than one. Something equally as detrimental as COVID has impacted our community. That being that Rochester Animal Services has ceased to intake homeless cats and kittens. This has created an enormous problem in our city neighborhoods. Multitudes of cats and kittens find themselves struggling to survive the cold winter, the hot summer, lack of food and water, injured, sick, dying. I never in a million years thought Rochester, New York would compete with third world countries in the number of cats and kittens running our streets. I would encourage each and every one of you to contact any one of the local TNR groups in our area and spend a day with one of them on the front lines. It is disturbing and heartbreaking, to say the least. Please take this problem seriously. Please advocate for the voiceless. Please open our city animal shelter and have the shelter do the job it was implemented to do. Our animals are dying for a change, literally. Please be that change. Thank you.
Joy Long Henry.
I am a board member of Habitat for Cats New York, a registered nonprofit in existence since 1999. Our mission is to trap, neuter, and return feral cats in Monroe, Wayne, and Ontario counties. Increasingly, however, we encounter abandoned, friendly cats and kittens which are deserving of loving homes. Unfortunately, RAS implemented a HAS model recently, which fully informing the city residents nor rescue orgs such as ourselves. The burden of rescuing these friendly cats and finding them homes now lies on already overburdened private rescue groups. This HAS model is very idealistic and sounds like a wonderful utopia on paper. The implementation has been far from that. Abandoned pets have been left to fend for themselves, subjected to all sorts of dangers. RAS was meant to operate to find the cats homes or foster homes. They have the infrastructure and the funding by the government to do so. Where is the money going now that they rarely take in cats? It is an utter travesty, and it will be exposed.
Lauren Kens Chattanooga.
The director of Rochester Animal Services should be fired. His attempts to mislead the community, local rescue groups, and local city government with a plan that has not been close to being implemented properly has caused great suffering in cats on the streets of Rochester, New York. We have countless testimonials of legitimate people being turned away for every possible reason under the sun. This isn't right, and this must be brought to light. I represent a multitude of city taxpayers and residents, but also the cats that are suffering as a result of the gatekeepers at the shelter. This is a travesty of epic proportions, and the truth will be exposed.
AJ Duran by Zoom.
Good evening, council members. As an attorney who was in the room when the PAB legislation was drafted, I would like to express concern about the underfunding of the PAB and the importance of independent legal counsel. During the drafting process, council assured members of the community that while the PAB's first-year budget might be low, once the PAB was up and running, funding would be increased based on the PAB's needs. We have now heard what the PAB's budget needs are from the executive director and others, and I hereby urge you to fully fund the PAB so that it can get ready to deal with the abusive policing crisis in Rochester. For example, among other operating expenses, the PAB desperately needs its own independent legal counsel. The PAB legislation envisioned this need and says, quote, "The board may seek and retain independent legal counsel for any purpose at its discretion," close quote. Independent legal counsel is especially important after the independent investigation of the city's response to the death of Daniel Prude. That report from Mr. Celli states that Tim Curtin and the city law department delayed and attempted to prevent the release of body camera footage, quote, "citing reasons that were factually incorrect, legally without basis, or both," close quote. In particular, Mr. Curtin falsely stated that the Attorney General's office requested keeping footage from the public view. In addition, Mr. Curtin publicly denied the city's obligation to release the footage under the Freedom of Information law, despite having no legal basis to do so. The report indicates that the reason Mr. Curtin and the law department did this were to prevent public outcry and protests. Such dishonest, unlawful, and unethical behavior from the city's top attorney demonstrates that he cannot be trusted on matters related to police misconduct. Thus, the PAB desperately needs trustworthy independent legal counsel, and in order to retain such counsel, the PAB must be fully funded. Thank you.
Elizabeth Hammer by Zoom.
She's not in the waiting room.
There's a Liz on the
That's
list.
Liz McGriff.
Okay. Carol Palmentier.
I am a trapper, rescuer, and caretaker of many colonies of cats throughout the city. There is an abandoned cat problem, and due to the lack of support and vetting, a feral cat increased throughout the city as well. I have contacted 2 councilmen over the years who basically ignored my concerns. One told me there is no cat problem. I am a volunteer and am trying to prevent suffering of these cats who have been abandoned by city residents for one reason or another. We desperately need affordable and accessible vetting for city residents. The few programs in place are inadequate. We need to start to work on this before it is completely out of control. Thank you.
And Chechi.
I am on the board of directors for a local rescue, and I am also a volunteer for Rochester Animal Services. As a volunteer for RAS, I know that the shelter has built up a network of wonderful foster caregivers who happily care for cats admitted to the shelter waiting for adoption. They care for the cats in their own home, according to the new HAS model recently adopted by the shelter. A wonderful idea, by the way. And with good fosters like the shelter has, it works beautifully. But since the beginning of the year, this network has been very underutilized. Many fosters have no cats to care for. The cats that are admitted receive wonderful veterinary care and are placed on the website for adoption. On average, there are 3 to 6 cats on the website at a time. Each cat receives somewhere between 5 and 25 applications. There are many people that want to adopt a cat, but there are not enough cats available. Most who apply to adopt never even receive a phone call because obviously there can only be one adopter. I have seen people apply for cat after cat, and eventually I stop seeing their names on applications. They must become frustrated that they are not getting calls. Perhaps these people are going to another rescue to adopt. I hope so. Meanwhile, I have personally participated in 2 rescues of cats from city residents who were denied access to shelter admission. One circumstance was a man whose daughter abandoned 13 cats in his house and he wanted them gone. His plan, after rejection from the shelter, was to take the cats to a campground and let them go. This is the worst outcome for indoor cats, to be relocated to an unknown location without food or water in the middle of winter. Volunteers, including myself, picked up the cats and brought them to another rescue outside the city who thankfully took them. The other was a woman who had just given birth to an immunocompromised premature baby, and her doctor told her she could not have animals in her home when she brought the baby home. This woman called the shelter multiple times, but was refused help. She was desperate since she loved her cats and didn't want to abandon them outside. I took those cats to a humane society in another county.
It's time.
Dr. Gail Harrison.
Council members and city administration, the time has come for sacrificial action on your part. The RPD has demonstrated they are not able to refrain from killing members of our Black and Brown families. The specific recommendations from the PAB for law enforcement must be enacted. Physical and emotional safety for Black and Brown individuals must be the highest priority endorsed by redistributing the RPD budget to fund all of the social services and community support necessary before the RPD is funded. Safety must be defined by members of the Rochester community, not by the RPD, who are a military force with military tactics and a military adversarial mindset. No amount of retraining or anti-bias training can ever be effective when the first responder has the option of killing the person in need of help. The members of the RPD that shoot first, maim with pepper spray, body slam, or choke women, children, the disabled, and those in the throes of a mental health crisis must not be allowed to continue policing our Black and Brown neighbors. They must be removed immediately. They have morally and ethically relinquished any right to police in our neighborhoods. The laws and contract that support killing innocent people by members of law enforcement without a shred of accountability are unjust and must be rejected. If it means dissolving the RPD for a day and only hiring back those who actually live in Rochester and not rehiring those with a history of complaints or convictions, that is the political sacrifice as you as community representatives must be willing to make for the sake of the people who elected you. The people will support you when you take the steps necessary to defend us from the actions of the members of the RPD.
Reedy Singh, voicemail.
Katie, if you're playing a tape, you're on mute.
Joe is, let me see.
He didn't know we couldn't hear it.
Oh, my bad. Oh, because she's turning around here.
I have it saved and can play it if we need to.
Neighbors pressured their landlord for repairs and got the repairs that they needed. The landlord raised the rent $200. This tenant is really vulnerable. She's low income. She can barely afford.
Turn it up, Joe.
but she's tolerating these substandard conditions because she's worried that if the repairs happen, the landlord's going to raise the rent. Good cause evictions prevent such a situation from happening. Tenants need protections to organize. Tenants need to be protected from displacement, from predatory rent hikes. Please pass good cause evictions protections. Thank you.
Hazel, can we loop back to the two participants that joined late?
Okay.
It should be Liz McGriff.
Tracy Farmer.
Mhm. I'm going to let Liz in first because she was on the A list.
Okay, Elizabeth McGriff.
Liz, whenever you're ready, we will start your time. Liz, I can see that you joined the meeting, but I think you're on mute.
Elizabeth McGriff.
So not Tracy Farmer.
We are going to have Liz go, but it looks like she is having issues with the audio, so you can begin. Tracy, whenever you're ready, I'll start your time. You joined the meeting, but I think you're on mute.
Do you want Tracy or do you want Liz?
We were trying to have Liz go, but it looks like her audio isn't working. So whenever
Okay.
you're ready, you can begin.
Okay. All right. So as you said, I'm Tracy Farmer. I'm current. So not Tracy Farmer. What?
You must have your YouTube video playing, so you just need to pause that first.
Oh, all right. Let me get rid of that.
Having issues with the audio, so you can begin.
Okay. Okay. So I'm Tracy Farmer. I'm currently a resident and school board member of Greece. However, Rochester is where I raised my children who attended and graduated from Rochester City School District schools. I have taught 32 years for Rochester and have been very involved over the years as an educator, parent, and community member. My community includes Rochester. As a member of the Alliance and Shades of Sisterhood, I come here to speak about a sad and horrific notoriety Rochester, New York holds across this nation and how this community can do better. We are the people, and the people pay taxes. I'd like to ask why we are still waiting for the Police Accountability Board to be fully funded. PAB was voted in by 75% of approximately 60,000 voters. I see the urgent need for council to come together for the community to stop RPD from holding themselves accountable with shallow and undefinable changes that are now being implemented by the body that continues to harm the people, sometimes to the point of murder. Our Black and brown sisters deserve to be protected and not harmed. This racist policing structure is not what is wanted or needed in Rochester. The Police Accountability Board must be fully funded if we are to heal our community. They must be allocated $5 million to effectively do what they have been elected to do, hold the police accountable. There can be no more stalling of releasing information, no more unanswered emails, and most of all, no more killings.
30 seconds.
When disciplinary powers are reinstated, PAB will then need an additional $3 million if you truly believe that you want to heal our city. Fully fund PAB in this year's budget. Thank you.
Let's see if we can try to get that voicemail played again.
1 second.
For Reedy Singh.
It will be playing 1 moment.
Hello, my name is Riddy, and first I want to thank City Council for passing, for moving forward with the vacancy study. This will make a really big difference for the tenants of Rochester. I also would like to ask City Council to please move forward with good cause eviction protections. Tenants in our city are very vulnerable to be displaced, to be moved from their homes, because they can't afford the rent in their homes anymore. due to predatory rent hikes. I was just speaking with a tenant who has been living in the same home for 10 years under pretty substandard conditions, who can barely afford the rent she has right now, but she doesn't want to move. She's worried about pressuring her landlord to do repairs in her home, because when her downstairs neighbors pressured their landlord for repairs and got the repairs that they needed, the landlord raised the rent $200. This tenant is really vulnerable. She's low income. She can barely afford rent as is, but she's tolerating these substandard conditions because she's worried that if the repairs happen, the landlord's going to raise the rent. Good cause evictions prevent such a situation from happening. Tenants need protections to organize. Tenants need to be protected from displacement, from predatory rent hikes. Please pass good cause evictions protections. Thank you.
I don't see Elizabeth Hammer. So that concludes our speakers.
Okay, so that concludes the Speak to Council session for this month. We will adjourn and return at 7:30 for the full council meeting. Thank you for joining.